Maryland lands four-star Bryce Jenkins.
You are Locked On Terps, your daily podcast on the Maryland Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tre Moore, video content creator for 247 Sports and InsideMarylandSports.com, and host of Locked On Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So thank you for making us part of your day. And today's episode is brought to you by the Gametime app. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. And the Maryland Terrapins get an absolutely humongous get on the recruiting trail, and four-star defensive tackles and also offensive lineman Bryce Jenkins. This kid is special, and this is exactly the type of guy that I've said that if we wanted to take our program to the next level, we've been pretty good over the last couple of years, but if we want to take it to the next level and we want to be maybe a 9-win team, maybe a 10-win team in college football, we need to land four-star, high-level types of guys, exactly what Bryce Jenkins is, but we have to land them up front. Yeah, we get some really good players on the outside. We get some really good players at the skill positions. I'm talking about wide receiver, running back, at corner. In our secondary, we've had a bunch of guys drafted to the NFL over the last couple of years. But the real difference right now in the Big Ten and the big boy programs in the Big Ten and that next tier down, even that next tier down, is up front. A lot of it comes up front. I think that's the biggest difference when you look at these teams. When I think about Michigan last year, yeah, Michigan had some good receivers, but I wouldn't say that their receiver core is like better than ours or that much better than us. They had a really good running back room, but I didn't feel like Blake Corum was the difference and the reason why they elevated so high as a team. Yes, Blake Corum was maybe the best running back in the country, but he really started up front for them. It was always about that offensive line. That's why any running back could really come in there and be successful. And that's why J.J. McCarthy, I thought, had a lot of time, had a lot of opportunities to make a lot of different plays because those guys up front. And then when you think about it, they also have that on the defensive line. Same type of thing. They have a bunch of guys that get drafted. They have some guy this year supposed to go in the first round up front on the defensive line, and Graham. And same with Ohio State. They have a bunch of offensive linemen that always get drafted, a bunch of defensive linemen, whether it's defensive ends, whether it's the pass rushers, whether it's the inside guys. They always have those types of players. I'm telling you, between the top guys in the Big Ten, Penn State as well. Penn State always seems to have a couple of offensive linemen and defensive linemen that are absolutely going to go in the first 2-3 rounds of the NFL draft. And that's right now the biggest difference between those big boy programs in the Big Ten. And of course, Oregon comes in now. They've had some really good offensive lines as well, and they've had some good defensive lines. And it's hard when you play these teams head-to-head to compete with some of these teams when you don't have the same level of players up front, because that's been the difference for Maryland. So getting a guy like four-star Bryce Jenkins, a guy that everybody in the country wanted. When I mean everybody in the country wanted this guy, I mean everybody in the country basically offered this kid, Bryce Jenkins, whether it was Penn State, whether it was Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Michigan, Miami, Ole Miss, Florida, wherever you think he probably had an offer from. He had an offer from just about every school, it feels like. And it makes sense because all the schools want a guy like this up front. And he goes both ways in high school. He goes both ways on the offensive and defensive line. That's why I'm kind of talking about both sides in terms of the college teams. When I talk about Michigan, offensive and defensive line. When I talk about Ohio State, offensive and defensive line. Even when you talk about the SEC schools, Bama, offensive, defensive line, Georgia, offensive and defensive line. That's the biggest difference between these programs, because that's where a lot of the games are won up front. And it's not the sexy way to win. It's not the cool way to win. And it's it's not going to be as flashy, and your casual fan isn't going to realize that how much the offensive line is doing. It's going to be more like, oh, that running back is a Heisman contender, but it's really they have the best offensive line in the country. Washington last year, I think they won the award, I think, for top offensive line in the country, made it to the national championship. So it tells you that you need guys up front to make your program to the next level. And Maryland's recruited well up front. We've had some good players up front for sure. We send guys to camps. We even have some guys get drafted, but it's not quite to the level of where I want it. And Bryce Jenkins comes in on the defensive line, and he comes in and he's already, I think, one of the highest ranked recruits that Coach Loxley has pulled from the defensive or offensive line. I still don't know exactly what this kid will play. I think he'll play defensive line is what it seems like on on a lot of the recruiting websites. He's listed as a defensive lineman, but some of them have him as an offensive lineman. So it's kind of interesting. I don't know exactly where he will fit in, but I think wherever you want to put him in, I think works for Bryce Jenkins. I think wherever you kind of want to put him, he's going to be effective on the offensive line. He's going to be effective on the defensive line. I watched his film. It was all clips on the defensive line. I'm telling you, this is a guy that Maryland needs, that Maryland wants. A guy that is just humongous. First of all, he's 6'5", 315. That's a pretty big dude to walk into college. So he's already pretty much the size that we would need him to be. So this is why I'm saying this is a guy that I think could play like pretty much right away on the defensive line. I expect him to be in the rotation right away. And then as a sophomore, be a starter probably and be one of our best players probably on the defense. That's kind of what I see his trajectory as a player. But for us to take the next level of the program, I've talked about it, you have to have these type of guys on your offensive or defensive line. But he's humongous, and when you watch him on film, he just plugs up the middle in terms of run defense. He's going to be a really good run defender if he decides to play on the defensive line. We're going to stick him inside, and he is going to be a really good run defender. On film, it's a little bit exemplified because he's just bigger, so much stronger than everybody else. And it won't quite be like that, but he's just moving people, and he's just ruining gaps. He's taking up multiple gaps, and he's one of those guys that you just have up front, and he just plugs up the run. But he also did it as a pass rusher. It was interesting because sometimes they kind of had him on the edge a little bit, and he would just come off the edge, and he would look pretty good doing it still for his size at 6'5", 315. He's not a guy that we're going to have out there on the edge, but he shows that he can be a pass rusher as well. It's going to be a lot of power rushing. He has a lot of that. He's going to push their offensive line back. He's going to make it really hard. He's a game wrecker inside that you need for your program if you want to take it to the next step. I really do believe that. I really believe that Maryland football, the next step for us, I really believe, is up front. And that's how we are going to take this team to the next level. Right now, Jordan Phillips, really good player. I love Jordan Phillips. I think he's really good. Tommy King-Basote, pretty good player up front. But we don't have a ton of difference makers, like real difference makers up front. And there's a difference between like a difference maker and a good player. Like good players are going to be in the right spot. They're going to make some good plays, but a difference maker is a guy that the other team has to really game plan around, and they have to be like, okay, we got to watch out for this. We got to watch out for that. If he's there, we have to double him. And I think Bryce Jenkins has a chance to be a true difference maker, not just a good player. I think his floor is just being a good player, and I think his ceiling is being a difference maker up front. I think he's a guy that potentially, when maybe not right away, but after a year or two, he's a guy that it's like, oh, we're playing Rutgers or something like that, and Rutgers has to really game plan on how to stop this guy and how to stop him up front. I really do believe that he can be a difference maker and not just a good player. A lot of the guys that we recruit are going to be just good players, but they're not guys that you have to game plan around. They're not guys that you have to say, oh, if he's there, you have to do that. And that's another big difference, I think, when you look at some of these schools. A lot of schools have difference makers up front in the Big Ten. And I wouldn't say that Maryland has a lot of difference makers. We have some good players. We have some guys that go off to play in the NFL and whatnot and are good, solid players. But I wouldn't say they're difference makers up there. And it makes their job easier. When you have a difference maker like Bryce Jenkins, I think is going to be, it makes the job a lot easier on the rest of the guys, because if he's getting double teamed, they're going to get single blocked, and that's a lot easier to get to the quarterback. He's just going to make it easier to stop the run for everyone because he can just kind of plug up the middle, and it makes it so not as many other people have to worry about what this gap, and if he goes there or whatever, it just makes it easier on everybody else when you land a guy like Bryce Jenkins. And I haven't really talked about his rating as a player. I've said he's a 4-star. The different websites all have him at a different spot, but On3 has him 4-star, ranked 368th in the class. 247 Composite has him ranked as 283rd, 32nd defensive line, have him ranked 3rd in DC. And then some other websites, Rivals has him really high. They have him as a 4-star. They have him number 1 player in DC. ESPN has him the highest, as they have him as the 10th ranked defensive lineman, and they have him ranked 146 nationally. So ESPN's really high on this kid. But yeah, he's a top 3 player in DC to almost every single website. So I think it'll be really interesting to see, but I think he has a chance to be a difference maker. I think he elevates our ceiling. And if we can continue to land guys like this up front, that's when we are going to see a big change for Maryland football. That's when we're going to see Maryland football take the next step. Yeah, we've won 3 straight bowl games, but what's next? There's always a higher ceiling you can reach. And so, especially with this program, we have plenty of more room to grow. And the way we're recruiting, I think that we have a chance to do that. This Maryland football class is shaping up to be a really high-level class for Coach Locksley, and we can keep on climbing. I will talk about that after this ad from the Gametime app. Have you ever wanted to go to a game at the last minute, like a Maryland Terrapins game, but finding tickets is hard? I've been there before. Buying tickets to your favorite event shouldn't be stressful. Gametime is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guaranteed, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the start of an event and even an hour after it starts. It's a place to find last-minute seats and take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. This Maryland class is shaping up to be Coach Locksley's best class, and we're currently a top 25, top 26 class, but the Terps can keep on climbing. I'm telling you now, this 2025 class, and I said it before we got a single commit, I said I think that this class has a chance to be the best that Coach Locksley has had yet. And the reason I said that was because I felt like these other classes, the 2024 class, 2023 class, even going back to maybe even the 2022 class, I thought we were getting close to a lot of kids, but we couldn't quite seal the deal. But we would land a kid here or there that was a really high-level player, but we couldn't quite get the whole entire class. So quite a place where I thought we were in a spot where it was like, okay, this is the class that I know is the best type of class that we can land. I always felt there was a little bit room to grow, but I thought we were doing a good job. I thought Coach Locksley was putting in all the effort, and I thought we were doing a good job, but I thought there was a new height that we could reach, and I thought the 2025 class was the perfect timing for us and where we are as a program to be our best class yet, because I thought We've won 3 straight bowl games. Coach Locksley has proven himself as a good coach. We just sent out in Talia, who just was the all-time Big Ten passing yards leader. We've had multiple guys like in our secondary go to the NFL. We've had a lot of success in our wide receiver core. We've had a lot of different players go pro and a lot of good things going on for the Maryland football program. And we're in the Big Ten, and the Big Ten's expanding, and it's a conference that everyone wants to be in. And we're still in a hotbed for recruits in the DMV. So I really believe that we still had a chance to elevate this recruiting class, because we would be a decent class every single year. We would hover around, like if I look at the 2024 class, it was a decent class. It was nothing special, but we would hover. We were 32 on Rivals, a little bit lower on 247. So 32, not a bad class at all. But I always thought that this year we'd had the chance to elevate that. And that's what we're doing right now. So right now on Rivals has us as the highest. They have us ranked as the 22nd ranked class in the country, which if we land in the top 25, for now on, for however long Coach Locksley's a coach at Maryland, if we're always around that top 25 place, we are going to have success as a program, and this program is going to be in a really good spot, and we're going to have a good team. And that's kind of where we are right now in this 2025 class. That's all I've ever wanted. I've wanted top 25 classes. 247 has us ranked as 26 ranked. Rivals are right behind USC, like I said, are right ahead of USC, right behind TCU at 22. They have us right behind Georgia Tech, right in front of Florida State. Like right now, we're in front of Florida State as a recruiting class. Like that's a pretty cool thing for us to be able to accomplish, to be able to do. And my thing is, this recruiting class isn't done. Has a chance to continue to climb. Has a chance to continue to get better, to continue to get higher. And there's a guy that I'm going to talk about in my last segment that's been talking a lot. But we got guys still on the board. And I think one guy that's going to elevate our class to the next level is Zymeer Smith, athlete that was originally committed to Bama. And it's kind of funny sometimes how these things work. When you commit to Bama, I swear, there's like a thing that like you're recruiting. When you commit to like a Bama-ish type of program, your recruiting usually goes up, it feels like. But like your recruiting ranking is where he's ranked, and he's ranked as a 4-star and 247 composites on a 4-star on most websites. And there's a reason he's going to Bama. I thought he's one of the most explosive players in the class, and he's going to be able to play offensive or the defensive side of the ball. And that's going to be an interesting kind of get. But Zymeer Smith, if we land him another 4-star player, an athlete that it looks like we're landing him. He's 100% to Maryland, according to Tom Loy and Brian Dawn. And so those two guys know what they're doing. They're usually right when they put in these type of things. And Coach Locksley was really able to make this kid decommit from Bama. And so I'm looking at it, I'm saying we land him, and there's a couple other guys that have potential that we could end up landing. And Coach Locksley's always good for a flip. He's always good for it. We can land in the top 20 recruiting classes. I'll be interested to see where we go up when we land Zymeer. I expect us to go up a couple of spots to hover around that 20th spot. And I think that's a really good spot to be. I think that's a perfect spot for a program. If we end in the top 25, not just this year, but for the next couple of years, and you see it go all the way through, and you have top 25 recruiting classes for 4 or 5 years, you're going to really see it pay off. I promise you. It's always, you have to be able to recruit at a high level to take your program to the next step. And I think Maryland is going to be able to do that as a program grows, as the pedigree as the program grows, and as we just get better. And so I'm looking at this class, I'm saying it's good. And we want to be in the top 25, but we have to continue to get better because guys behind us are going to continue to get guys. But I like where Maryland football is recruiting, and I think it doesn't surprise me at all that this is where we are. This is kind of where I see the trajectory as a program, and it continues to build. And guys are starting to stay home. I barely talked about Malik Washington today. He was the start of it. He was the start of getting a 4-star quarterback, and he could be the start of being like, oh, Maryland football is doing some really special things in recruiting, and I think that we have the opportunity to do that. So I'm going to talk about this guy this offensive lineman, I've talked about guys up front that continues to talk about Maryland. Will Maryland be able to land this kid? I will talk about that right now. So Jaylen Gilchrist, 4-star offensive lineman from Virginia. It says from Virginia Beach. He continues to be on Twitter talking with Malik Washington. And you guys all know Malik Washington, our 4-star quarterback. I just talked about him. But Malik Washington, 4-star quarterback commit to Maryland. And he said on Twitter, should I shock the world at Malik Washington? And this Twitter stuff is always weird. Like, it's always us reading into it. A lot of happened with the Jordan Seaton thing. It was like Jordan Seaton seemed like he had potential maybe to end up flipping to Maryland and had the chance to do that, but it didn't end up coming into fruition. But this Jaylen Gilchrist kid, 4-star offensive lineman, 4-star on every single website, really highly ranked, actually, rated as the 3rd player in Virginia, 3rd interior offensive lineman, and 91st ranked nationally. And so he's a really high level player. Everybody in the country wants him. Bama, Georgia, everyone. And so he was saying, yeah, Malik Washington, should I shock the world? And then Malik Washington posted on a phone call with Jaylen Gilchrist, a FaceTime with him on Twitter as well. And so I don't know what to make of this. I don't really know exactly if it means anything. And I'm not going to lie to you guys. He's heavily predicted to go to South Carolina, but I'm seeing all this stuff and I'm like, things like this can change. They always can. And so I know Coach Loxley is really, really, really pushing for this kid to come to Maryland. All the South Carolina. All right, here's the thing. The guys that haven't predicted to South Carolina are all the South Carolina insiders, which usually are usually right. They have good percentages, but still, it's not always right. And so it'll be interesting to see if something maybe changes for this. But he'd be our highest ranked recruit on the entire recruiting class. And he's a guy that would bring us to, if we land him and Zymir Smith, you could be like, Maryland's recruiting class is ranked 17th in the country. Like it could be something like get like 16th, 15th. Like it could get to a place where it's like, this class is high. Like this class is a really high class. And I think it would have the opportunity to do that if we were able to land this kid, Jaylen Gilchrist. But I don't know if we are going to, like I said, heavily projected to South Carolina. But if we land another kid up front to go along with Bryce Jenkins, and Bryce Jenkins probably going to be on the defensive line. But if we land another kid up front, he's 6'4", 290, so he has the frame that we can put weight on him, which is exactly how you want it. If we land these two guys up front, it's perfect. It's perfect situation for the Maryland Terrapins. We haven't recruited 4-star talent up front. We just haven't. It hasn't come to us. We just haven't been able to really get it. And so it's rare to get. Everybody goes really hard for it. And I'm really hoping that he realizes that Maryland is the place to be and it's not South Carolina. And that right now Maryland's program is on a better trajectory than South Carolina. South Carolina, they always get some guys, but we were able to flip Braden Lee from South Carolina. We have a little rivalry going on with South Carolina. We don't like South Carolina. They get mad when we flip one of their guys. And so here's a guy he went on the official visit to Maryland. It seems like Maryland's very much in the conversation. I would say it's between Maryland and South Carolina for Jaylen Gilchrist. And I know Coach Loxley is pushing for this kid. And he's a guy that's a rare breed that can come in and play probably really early, if not right away on the offensive line for Maryland football. And he could really grow into an NFL type of guy. So it'll be interesting to see if we're able to get a guy like Jaylen Gilchrist. I think we have a shot at it. He would really help. He'd really help this team. Like I said, he'd be our highest ranked player. I know Malik Washington would be considered the most impactful, but Malik Washington isn't ranked as high as this kid. Like this kid is getting close. He's not close quite to 5-star, but like 91st ranked player in the country. Like you're a pretty high level football player. Those are usually what the the big dogs get when you think of it. When you think about in the Big Ten, Penn State, think about those type of schools, Oregon, Ohio State. Those are usually they get Bama, or of course they're not the Big Ten, but those type of schools usually get these type of guys. But if Maryland's able to land this guy, watch out. Maryland recruiting could be coming, and we might have just figured it out. But that's all we have for today. Thank you for listening to Locked on Terps. Make sure you like and subscribe. We're here every day talking Maryland football and basketball. So thank you for listening to Locked on Terps.